With the Skeleton Crew now streaming on Disney Plus, there are 9 seasons of Star Wars shows on Disney Plus currently. So today we're going to take all 9 of those seasons and put them on a tier ranking list. Hi, my name is Zach, and I started this YouTube channel because I cannot watch something without having to talk about it afterwards, whether it be movie or TV shows. If that sounds like you, you're in the right place. Consider hitting that subscribe button, and while you're at it, as I'm talking, join me down in the comment section below. Put your ranking of how you would put all 9 of these Star Wars seasons on a tier ranking list. I'd love to see yours, as mine is not the right list, it's just my list. This is going to go in order of the show's releases. This is not going to be just a formal ranking video. I'm going to have that posted actually in a week, so if you're here a week later, that's already up on the channel. You can check that out if you'd like a more proper ranking of these shows. With all that out of the way, let's get started. And thus, we're going to kick things off with Mandalorian Season 1. And without burying the lead too much here, I'm going to put Mandalorian Season 1 in the A category. Mandalorian came out at a time after the sequel trilogy had just kind of wrapped up. Star Wars was very divisive amongst the fandom. And when The Mandalorian came out, it was kind of a harmonious celebration within the fandom. One of the last times, actually, that happened. And with the introduction of Mandalorian on the Disney Plus service, Star Wars was able to go deeper into the corners of the galaxy, explore them a little bit more. We still went to familiar planets like Tatooine and others, but what I really like about Mandalorian Season 1 is that exploration of the universe, going deeper into some of the Mandalorian lore. And the major thing that Mandalorian Season 1 did, besides allowing us going deeper into the Star Wars universe, is it was actually able to take new characters in Star Wars and burst them onto the scene of the pulp culture zeitgeist with Mandalorian and, at the time, Baby Yoda. These two came out like juggernauts. People who had never even watched Star Wars, didn't care about Star Wars, were posting Baby Yoda memes all over Facebook. I'm looking at you, Grandma. But it was just a celebratory experience with Mandalorian Season 1. And even just beyond the celebratory aspect of it, it's a good season. It's a fun season. It's got an anthology type feeling of Star Wars stories going on in there. Just going to various locations, different planets, encountering different galaxies, different people, different species, all along with Mandalorian and Grogu, as they also tell this kind of lone wolf adopting a baby cliche story in the Star Wars universe. I really enjoyed Mandalorian Season 1. I'm going to put it up there in the A category. So moving right along to Mandalorian Season 2. And for me, Mandalorian Season 2 took everything that I liked about Mandalorian Season 1 and raised it up just a little bit. Introduced us to some new characters as well that have also gone on to be very popular within the Star Wars fandom and universe. Also bringing back some old classics, especially when it comes to Boba Fett. And Boba Fett's a character in the Star Wars lore that, you know, Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back was really the only medium in live action that had used Boba Fett up until that point, and I never really got the hype. I never really got the love for that character. To me, he didn't really do all that much in those movies. In Mandalorian Season 2, they took that character and put him on the pedestal that he deserved to be on, because Boba Fett was amazing and awesome when he was introduced into Mandalorian Season 2. Aside from just introducing new characters and bringing in these old characters as well, it was a further exploration of the galaxy, and it also had more of a connective story with Mandalorian trying to find, now we know, Grogu, a safe haven with the most powerful Jedi out there, which of course ended up being Luke Skywalker. And I don't care what anyone says, we were all geeking out, we were all freaking out when at the end of Mandalorian Season 2, Luke came in there, burst through with his lightsaber. Yeah, the deepfake, the de-aging technology that they tried to do to make a younger Mark Hamill look like Mark Hamill in Return of the Jedi. It's a little creepy, didn't exactly work out, but the story, the emotional aspect that you get from that story, from that conclusion to the season, definitely paid off. And for me, Mandalorian Season 2 is some of the best Star Wars Disney Plus that we have gotten. So I'm going to put Mandalorian Season 2 in the S category. I think that it was a great season and definitely still one of the best we've ever gotten. Which then brings us to Mandalorian Season 3. And when it comes to Mandalorian Season 3, I feel the season has a really big disadvantage because, as we'll get to later on in this tier ranking, Book of Boba Fett came out and it kind of undid the emotional ending that Season 2 of Mandalorian had, where Grogu goes off with Luke, and Mandalorian and Grogu have to say their goodbyes. At the beginning of Season 3, Mandalorian and Grogu, they're just chilling again because halfway through Book of Boba Fett, we find out how that happened. But because of that, I feel like a lot of the emotional weight and a lot of emotional satisfaction that came from the end of Season 2 just got diminished a little bit when Season 3 started. On top of that, even though Mandalorian Season 3 had some really fun moments, some fun episodes, still had some fun exploration of the Mandalorian lore and this galaxy, it also felt like it was the most jumbled story. It didn't feel like they had it as planned out as the other seasons did. Some episodes felt really meandering to me. Some of them felt pointless, like they didn't really need to go anywhere. And Mandalorian Season 3, while still a decent season of the Mandalorian show, was definitely a big step down for me of the first 2 seasons. So for that reason, I'm going to put Mandalorian Season 3 in the C category. It's fine enough, but it definitely does not reach the heights that Mandalorian Season 1 and Season 2 both were able to reach. And that brings us to the Book of Boba Fett. Now, at the end of Mandalorian Season 2, there was a post-credit scene that announced that we were indeed going to get a Boba Fett show. And because of how I felt about Boba Fett in Mandalorian Season 2, as I mentioned, he was awesome. They really gave that character a great presence on screen and really put him on that pedestal that so many other people had him at that I wasn't able to see in Boba Fett. So I was actually really looking forward to the Book of Boba Fett. And just to put it plain and simple, Book of Boba Fett is going down into the D category. I found that this show was just very poorly executed, very poorly planned out. A lot of the show consists of Boba Fett taking baths and having flashbacks to living with Tusken Raiders. I didn't find all that interesting. Even the Godfather aspect of the show that they were trying to do with Boba Fett taking over the crime lord scene in Tatooine, it didn't really feel that impactful. It didn't really feel like it went anywhere. And the show took a little bit of a detour to set up Mandalorian Season 3 halfway through its season by basically just throwing in 2 episodes of Mandalorian Season 2.5, showing us how Mandalorian got back together with Baby Yoda. And yes, they do have a team up at the end of Book of Boba Fett with Mandalorian and Boba Fett teaming up together, so it does kind of connect within the season itself. But it's just such a distraction from the story that they're attempting to tell with Boba Fett in this season that it really does just kind of hurt this overall package. Even though I think that those 2 episodes are actually pretty good Mandalorian episodes, here they just felt pretty out of place. Beyond that, Boba Fett character, while I thought he was great in Mandalorian Season 2, they made him kind of a doof. He made him look kind of like a doofus in this season of Book of Boba Fett. There's many moments where Boba Fett just comes across like an idiot, whether he's holding up a droid and announcing who he is to this droid, or at the beginning of the season, we see him clearly crawl out of the Sarlacc pit with his armor on, to then he believes that he forgot his armor in the Sarlacc pit, so he has to go back and look for it. Just things didn't make sense, poorly executed, a very, very poor show in my opinion. For a long time, it was my least favorite of the Star Wars shows, so that is why it's ending up in the D category. Only saved from that F category, because I do think that those 2 Mandalorian episodes in there, while misplaced, are still pretty entertaining. Now let's talk about my biggest disappointment of Disney Plus Star Wars shows, or just Disney Plus shows in total, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I was so hyped for this show when it was coming out, and like many people, I was dying to get more Obi-Wan Ewan McGregor content from the Star Wars universe. And then they make the announcement, Obi-Wan Kenobi is greenlit. They are bringing back Ewan McGregor. They are bringing back Hayden Christensen as Anakin, Darth Vader, my favorite character in fiction of all time. And they are going to do a season of Obi-Wan taking place 10 years after Revenge of the Sith dealing with the trauma and the post-traumatic stress that Obi-Wan is dealing with after losing Anakin to Darth Vader, also picking up with Anakin as Darth Vader 10 years later. So much promise for this show that had me extremely excited that the letdown was just that much greater. Not only are you bringing back Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, you're giving them the cheapest looking show. Obi-Wan Kenobi had a really great first episode, don't get me wrong. When we get introduced to Obi-Wan at the beginning of the show, see where he's at in Tatooine, even the inciting incident of Leia being taken and that ultimately being what gets Obi-Wan off of Tatooine for the first time in 10 years, which allows Vader to sense his presence. All that I thought was a really good setup for the show. But as the show went on, it just started to look cheaper and cheaper, and like less effort was being put into the production value, and the story itself, to me, really started to feel repetitive and redundant. Getting Leia introduced in here as a 10-year-old girl, I was okay with, but having her be the inciting incident that gets Obi-Wan off the planet, that should have been it. But then she overstays her welcome to the point that this becomes a Obi-Wan saves Leia, Obi-Wan loses Leia, Obi-Wan saves Leia, Obi-Wan loses Leia again and again and again throughout the entire show. The best parts of this, for sure, are the interactions between Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen in the Darth Vader suit. I love everything about the Darth Vader and Obi-Wan conflict that's in here when we get it, to the point that the finale, Obi-Wan with the rematch of Darth Vader 10 years later, definitely lived up to some emotional heights as well as thrilling action heights with the lightsaber battle that I was hoping to get when this show was first greenlit. But there's just so much within the rest of the plot and story structure that's just messy, that's just meandering, that just wastes its time, that's thus makes this one of the most disappointing projects to me that Disney Plus has ever put out. It's not terrible. I'm gonna put it at the C category, mostly because the Darth Vader and Obi-Wan interactions really do save it. Other than that, though, this one just let me down big time. That's gonna bring us to Andor, and simply put, Andor is an S tier. Andor is an S tier. I was kind of blown away by Andor because while I did enjoy Rogue One quite a bit in the theaters and even on Blu-ray when I've been watching it at home, the characters of Rogue One never really captivated me. I never really got engaged or that invested in the characters in Rogue One, including Cassian Andor himself. So when they announced that they were going to do a whole Disney Plus show about Cassian Andor, I felt like I couldn't care less. But of course, I was going to check it out. And when I did, I was completely blown away. Not just by the production value, not just by the fact that this is the best Star Wars Disney Plus looking show they have ever done. A lot of that has to do with the fact that this was shot on location as opposed to something like Obi-Wan, which I think looks the cheapest of all the Star Wars shows on Disney Plus. That was shot in the volume, that was all on a stage, whereas this is out on real locations, real environments. You can really feel it when you watch Andor. But on top of all of that, Andor was just able to tell an overarching story within the Star Wars universe about the Empire. We are getting the most in-depth look of how the Empire works and navigates and how it functions that we have ever gotten in Star Wars. And I found all that just so exciting and thrilling. On top of that, you've got Andor in here going through various different situations throughout the entire show. The prison storyline where Andor is imprisoned by the Empire and we see how they use their prisoners as slaves to work and build their empire further. I thought all that was fascinating and great. It was definitely my favorite story arc within the season and within all of the Disney Plus TV shows. Andor is just one of those shows that came out of nowhere for me. I wasn't anticipating it. I wasn't looking forward to it. And every single aspect of it blew me away. Even though it's a little bit of a slower burn in a Star Wars show, that slow burn was just so nice to be able to sit in for a little bit and to explore this galaxy even further. I cannot wait to see Andor Season 2. I hope that they can keep the quality of both the production and the storytelling the same height as Andor is, because Andor, to me, S-tier Star Wars Disney Plus show, best they've done so far. And then we've got Ahsoka, and this is going to be a controversial placing, I'm sure, because Ahsoka, if you're a fan of Star Wars Clone Wars, if you're a fan of Rebels, you probably love this show. You probably loved this season. I know my brother, who was very much so into the Clone Wars and into Rebels since they basically first came out. He loved Ahsoka. For me, I never really had all that much time to invest into Star Wars Clone Wars, into Star Wars Rebels. I knew a little bit about the Ahsoka character, mostly from the Clone Wars movie, so not a great introduction to her. So watching Ahsoka for me, it was just very inside baseball. Instead of feeling like an on-ramp for both casual and hardcore fans of Star Wars who watched all the animated shows to enjoy, it felt like it very much just catered to the Clone Wars and Rebels crew. This was very much just a Rebels Season 4 to the point that character introductions are very minimal. I didn't really care about a lot of the characters because I haven't been along with them in animation form. So the introductions here I thought were kind of poor. The Ahsoka character herself really wasn't all that interesting to me in this season. And having never watched Rebels, this person they're looking for, Ezra, the entire crux of the show that I'm supposed to care about who they're going to find, Ezra, I didn't care. I didn't know who that was. I didn't understand the relationship between him and Ahsoka. To me, this show just kind of failed to be an all-inclusive Star Wars experience. Does that mean that I hated the show? No, there were definitely moments I liked. For example, Hayden Christensen coming back in here as Anakin. I definitely had some big geek-out moments when that happened in the show, and I'm so thankful that I got to see a flashback to the Clone Wars with Hayden Christensen as Anakin in the Clone Wars. That was such a great fan moment, that fan servicing moment that I just absolutely adored getting to see. But as a whole package, the show did very little to entice me, did very little to interest me, and I just, by the end of it, didn't find myself caring all that much. Maybe if I go back and watch Clone Wars and Rebels, I will find myself caring. Unfortunately, I don't have all the time in the world to do that. So, for me personally, Ahsoka is a D-list tiered Star Wars Disney Plus show. Not the worst, but I didn't think it was all that great. But speaking of the worst, let's talk about Acolyte, because Acolyte is a show that I really disliked my entire experience watching. So without even burying the lead, Acolyte goes in the F tier. Acolyte is a big F for me. There's some fantastic, we're giving credit where credit's due, there are some fantastic lightsaber battles in this show. Some of the best lightsaber battles that we've seen since probably, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon took on Darth Maul in Phantom Menace. But even with the great choreographed lightsaber fight battles that we've got in this show, it could not save the plot and the story from being just an almost unwatchable mess. This show was introduced to us. It was announced to us as a whodunit murder mystery, focusing on the Sith side of Star Wars. Very intriguing. All things that I was very interested in checking out. Within the first 2 episodes, the whodunit is basically told to you anyways. The characters in here never really got that interesting to me. I never cared about any of them. They try to do this clever twin storyline, switcheroo, light side, dark side switcheroo. They try to do this. It doesn't work. I never cared about the twins. I never cared about the characters. They never really made me care about the characters. They messed with Star Wars lore that ticked off a lot of Star Wars fans that never did them any favors, even though I'm not someone who necessarily cares that they messed with lore. If you're going to mess with lore, make it great. They didn't make it great. The witch's side plot of creating the twins, all that kind of stuff, the power of 1, the power of 2, the power of many, didn't care about it, didn't think it worked. The direction in this can be very poor. The blocking in this can be very poor. And when it just comes down to the basics of the story, did I care about the characters? No. Was I enticed by the story? No. Was the action kind of cool? Sure. Everything else, big F. Big fail. And that is why Acolyte is ending up in my personal tier ranking at the F category. Which leaves us with the first season of Skeleton Crew. Now, Skeleton Crew is currently airing on Disney Plus. It's actually just about to wrap up. It's not wrapped up just quite yet. But as the show is going on, as we're already, I think, 6 episodes deep into it, I'm really enjoying this show. I'm really enjoying Skeleton Crew. I feel like the promise, unlike Acolyte, which promised to be a murder mystery, focusing on the Sith side, really intriguing Star Wars story, I feel like it failed at all that. Skeleton Crew was announced as a fun kids adventure in Star Wars that's not necessarily made for kids, but goes back to that Amblin, goes back to that Goonies era of storytelling. And I feel like Skeleton Crew so far has 100% delivered on that promise. The show feels very Goonies, even being at the core of it a pirate story with these kids getting mixed up with a pirate with Jude Law, who Jude Law is just kind of elevating the show for me. There's a nice, interesting mystery element thrown in there of the planet that the kids are from. You're not quite sure what this planet is, what this planet was used for. The show's doing a very good job of executing that mystery, keeping it intriguing and enticing. And furthermore, what a lot of the Disney Plus Star Wars shows failed to do was get me invested in their characters. I'm looking at you, Acolyte. But with Skeleton Crew, I'm really invested in these characters. I think the kid actors are very charming, very delightful. Neil is the best. I just love Neil. And them as a group, them as a crew, along with Jude Law, they're just a fun dynamic. They're just fun characters to go on this adventure through the Star Wars galaxy with. Now, is this personally one of my favorite Star Wars adventures to go on? Not necessarily. I do think that it's a little bit more aimed for the kids' side than it is for someone like me who's in their late 20s. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I think that this show is so far executed pretty well, delivering on the promise that it set out to deliver. And it's fun. I'm having fun with Skeleton Crew. I'm having fun with this crew. The Star Wars adventure is fun. I'm going to put Skeleton Crew at the B tier category. It could go higher, could go lower, depending on how this finale goes. But as it is right now, Skeleton Crew is going to be at the B tier. I'm having a good time with it, and I hope that that continues. If you like more content like this, I got more rankings right up there that you can check out. And if you're here a week after this video is out, I've got a proper Star Wars show ranking video right down there that you can go and check out. And there's another video sitting there as well if you're not here a week later. Thank you guys, as always, so much for joining me, for watching this video. I appreciate it so much. Don't just watch movies and TV, talk movies and TV. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.